365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We appreciate all of those of you who streamed in. Yeah, we're going to be here all season, so you got to keep streaming in. But this is the last show we'll be doing after an Eagle game for a long period of time. We appreciate Jeff Kerr for hopping on with us almost every single Monday. We made it Tuesday this week because of a Monday night game, a Monday night disaster. Jeff Kerr, let me start here. The Philadelphia Eagles lost because feel free to go wherever you need to.
You name a reason, Jody, I'll give you one. Offense was pathetic pretty much the last 5 weeks of the season. Really, the last 7 weeks of the season. I mean, they're the first team since the 86 Jets, and you know that 86 Jets team well, Jody, to lose 6 of their final 7 games after a 10-1 start. And that 86 Jets team won a playoff game and probably
they won one before they bowed out.
And honestly, Jody, they should have went to the AFC Championship game if we're going to talk about sports history. But I had the vibe something was wrong with that team. Something was seriously wrong with that team. And, John McMullen and I, we've heard things all year. But when you win a game on Christmas after a 3-game losing streak and the games they had, and you have no emotion, it felt like a loss, you knew something was up. Like something was seriously up. It's like, okay, all this stuff you're hearing is starting to be put together. And that's when I knew. But their defense, they couldn't stop a lick before Matt Patricia. And changing coordinators that late in the year never works, just because even if it's the same system, it's still a different terminology. It's still a different mindset. So you got communication. They were complaining about communication issues before Matt Patricia. So can you imagine what happened after that? Really, the only coach right now I would consider keeping are Michael Clay and Jeff Stoutland. The rest, it's just been a cluster. You know what? This team has been terrible the last 7 weeks of the season. They have been the worst team in the NFL. When you are losing to the Cardinals, the Giants, the Seahawks with backup quarterback, you get blown out by Baker Mayfield and the Bucs again. And the Bucs were a hot team going into the playoffs, but the Bucs aren't world beaters. I mean, really, you should have lost by more than 32-9. I mean, this is an abject failure, an abject disaster for this football team. Changes are coming, guys.
Yeah, they better, Jeff, because that was frustrating to watch. And we talk about a lot the last 7 games. Everyone's talking about this collapse of the last 7 games, which was epic and historic. But really, if we take a look at the whole 18-week season, there's been something off with this team from week 1. And we kept ignoring it because they were finding ways to win, but they really haven't looked great, especially on offense, even though the final numbers would tell you they still finished with a top 10 offense in terms of yards. Something just looked off. And yesterday, how could they come out against this team knowing that Todd Bowles is going to blitz the hell out of Jalen Hurts? He does it every time he plays Jalen Hurts. And once again, every single time the blitz comes, they're running verticals. They have no answer for the blitz, or they're running curl routes against man coverage. What is going on? Is that on Nick Sirianni? Is that on Brian Johnson? Or is that on Jalen Hurts? What are you seeing when they have zero answers for a blitz that all of us knew was coming?
As someone who coaches a sport where talent trumps everything, I will tell you flat to your face, Bill, talent is the biggest issue. Everybody goes, well, okay, they're running verticals. They don't have a hot read. They do have a hot read. It's not there. Look what was on the field last night when you took A.J. Brown out of the equation. You had Devonta Smith and old Julio Jones, Quez Watkins, who flat out stinks. I talked to Quez a lot. He's just not good. You don't have the talent at receiver. You don't have the depth at tight end to actually do anything about. Oh, by the way, you don't have the talent at running back either. I'm sorry. You don't. Everybody loves DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift was a 1,000-yard rusher this year. DeAndre Swift was a really good running back for them. Just did not get the ball enough. He didn't. And he's not that great at blitz protection. Near is Kenny Gainwell. But Kenny Gainwell's better than him. That's why he played. Boston Scott was essentially useless this season. The offensive line, I saw a lot of problems on the interior, particularly at right guard. most of this season. I'm not saying Cam Jurgens is going to be an issue long term. I don't think so. But I saw the issue. Jason Kelsey did not have. Jason Kelsey was a first team All Pro and didn't have the dominant Jason Kelsey year that we're all accustomed to seeing. He didn't. Maybe that's why he is strongly considering retiring, if not retiring.
He's officially retiring. I don't know if you saw it yet today, at least as per Adam Schefter, that he told his teammates.
Yeah. I mean, he hinted Friday that's probably going to be the case. But again, I just don't see the talent that everybody else sees on that offense. And talent trumps coaching any day of the week. Oh, by the way, the coaching is worse than the coaching didn't maximize any of this talent. That's why Brian Johnson likely will not be back. That's why Nick Sirianni likely will not be back. When you have, I'm just looking at it all season. When you have Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, you got to be better than what you put out on the field. Dallas Goedert, you have an offensive line with Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata. You got to be better than what they put out on the field, and they didn't. To me, am I concerned about the routes they run? Yes. Am I concerned about the direction the offense is going? Yes. But look, these guys, they work 18, 20 hours. They know the blitz is coming. They absolutely know the blitz is coming. They don't have an answer. Bottom line.
And you're putting that more on the talent. You don't think that it was Sirianni or Brian Johnson?
What talent did you see on that field last night, Bill? That's what I'm telling you. What talent did you see on that field? Because I didn't see it. I haven't seen it all year. Oh, by the way, you didn't have your best receiver, a top 5 receiver. I'm blaming everybody. There isn't all these players, coaches. No, this is everybody. Every single person on this football team deserves blame to that. Everybody. I'm not on this fire Brian Johnson crusade because he's going to probably get fired anyway. You got to change the players in that locker room too. You do.
Oh, there's going to be changes in the players. I think we're all zeroing in on the coaches right now. I said this to Bill in the first hour. The back 7. John and I have this conversation all the time. He gives the front 4, a.k.a. 5, 6, 7, 8, because of situational substitutions, a lot more slack than I do. I think the defensive line has struggled significantly this year. But we all acknowledge the back 7 has been brutally bad. If you're going to move off Bradberry, which is going to be very difficult because of his contract, but how do you put him back there after the awful year that he had? Who knows what's going to happen with Slay? A, he's scheduled to make a lot of money. B, he didn't play all that well this year. Not as bad as Bradberry, but his contract may be an issue. Their safeties, their linebackers, they need to redo the whole back 7. That's pretty bad. That's a whole lot of work, Jeff Kerr. How do you replace a back 7?
You know what, Jody? That's going to be one of the mysteries of the offseason, right? Because I agree with you. Yeah, Slade probably isn't back. Bradberry probably isn't back. You're going to change up the defense anyway. That whole defense is gone in terms of coaches out of here. So you're right. Kevin Byron ain't coming back. Katie Ringo and Eli Ricks are going to be back because, they're going to be there. They're cheap, but who knows what their future is? Who knows if they fit whatever they're trying to do? Reed Blankenship, Cindy Brown's going to be out next year. They got to overhaul the linebackers. Jody, it's starting to make my head spin what they're going to do, but they're going to have to do it. I mean, you can't get worse than the 31st and 32nd ranked defense over the last 10 weeks of the season. That's how bad they were. Yep. They had no chance to win that football game last night. Absolutely no chance if you just looked at raw numbers.
You mentioned James Bradberry not coming back. The problem is I'm looking at his contract now. He's got a $17 million dead cap hit in 2024. How the hell do you get out from underneath that contract? What did they do with James Bradberry? No one's going to trade for him.
No, he's pretty much useless. You're going to have to eat the money. I mean, honestly, if you want to get rid of him, you're going to have to eat the money, or you just kind of keep him around next year. And I don't know if they want to do that. I mean, you just benched the guy for Kelly Ringo and Eli Ricks last night. And James Bradberry, early numbers coming in. 4 or 5, 118.8 passer rating, 1 touchdown, should have been 2. The incompletion was the drop by Mike Evans. James Bradberry's Eagles season was reminiscent of the Eagles defense's fall. It almost was like as he went, they went.
I would make my decision on Bradberry in a set. And the problem is you don't have a coach. We'll see if Sirianni stays, but if they do make massive and drastic changes, you would lean on the coach. I'd have faith in Howie doing it to a point, but somebody's just got to look in his eye and see if he's going to, in his exit meeting, and say, you realize you sucked this year, right? You realize we gave you a whole bunch of money this year, right? You realize you didn't earn squat this year. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to be better next year?
I think James Bradberry does, in fact, know he was not good this year.
Okay, well, but I want to, much like what's going to happen with Sirianni over these next 24, 48 hours, what's your answer? How do you rectify this situation? And if I don't like what I hear, yeah, I'm with you, Jeff Kerr. I'm eating the $17 million. I got to move on. Now, if he can really convince me and explain to me why he had this massive drop off, then maybe I hang on to him and we'll see if he can actually do it. Maybe end up cutting him next year in training camp. Who knows? But he's here during the off season. If I like what I hear, if I believe that he will work hard during this off season to rectify what was a god awful season. Otherwise, yeah, I'm cutting him. It's a bad pill to swallow, 17 million. But it's, if you believe he comes out and has the same exact season next year, which would you rather do? Take a $17 million dead cap hit or watch him have the same exact awful season? I can't watch that again this year.
Oh, yeah, Jody. So I would put on my NFL GM cap here. And again, I'm not a front office guru by any means, but the post-June 1st cut will be very beneficial because you could spread out that cap for 2 seasons. So maybe that's what they do.
Right. They could spread it out over 2 years. How do you think these next 24, 48 hours play, Jeff? We know there's going to be a meeting between Roseman and Laurie and Sirianni, and we've seen before that these meetings are all important. It's what cost Doug Peterson his job. The Eagles weren't going to fire him. They were a week late to the party, joining we need to find ourselves a new coach because they didn't pull the plug on Doug immediately. It was after he had a meeting with Laurie. And Laurie didn't like what he was hearing. He didn't have the answers that he was looking for. And we found out after the fact that they were infighting about the coaching staff. Will Nick Sirianni give Laurie the answers that he needs to save his job?
I think he'll give him the Nick Sirianni type answers, but I don't know if that's going to help him at this point. I mean, Jeffrey Laurie fired Doug Peterson 3 years after he won a Super Bowl. He fired Andy Reid, who, in my mind, is, if not, he's a top 3 coach ever, at least in the modern era. And he fired him, so. Did
you have a problem with when he fired Andy? I thought it was time to move on.
It was time. No, it was time. I thought Andy needed to change the scenery. So I didn't have a problem with that. But if you're going to say it, it's almost like saying the Cleveland Browns fired Bill Belichick. They once fired him. He ended up being the greatest head coach of all time. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes you do need that change of scenery. And Andy Reid was clearly better at his second stop than he was with the first. So, but it just goes to show you, Jeffrey Laurie is not afraid to fire anybody or anything. And I was always under the impression, even if they got blown out in this wild card game, that there were going to be offensive and defensive changes on both sides, and the Eagles were going to pick the Nick Sirianni's coordinators because Nick picked these guys. Nick picked the current guys that were there. I'm not so sure Nick survives this because, this whole team, it's just talking to players, talking to team sources. Look, players can stick up for Nick all they want. It's not good. There were problems Nick Sirianni could not get this team out of. I mean, how's a team that went 27-3 in their last 30 starts at Jalen Hurts all of a sudden just boom? They just collapsed. It's like they fell off a cliff. So, I mean, this is one of the rare years where there are a lot of good coaches available, whether they're first-year head coaches, whether they're experienced like Jim Harbaugh, Bill Belichick. If you believe there's an upgrade over Nick Sirianni, and there is, I think you have to make the switch.
A lot of fans, you just mentioned Bill Belichick. A lot of fans are throwing out that name, Mike Vrabel. But when you look at Jeffrey Laurie and you look at his history, he doesn't like hiring retreads, and he doesn't like hiring defensive coaches. Nick Sirianni, offensive coach, nobody knew about him. Doug Peterson, offensive coach, no one really knew about him. Andy Reid, offensive coach, nobody really knew about him. The only shiny object that Jeffrey Laurie ever went after was Chip Kelly, but he was also an offensive coach. I guess you'd have to go all the way back to Ray Rhodes for the defensive coach that he hired. Do you see, if they move on from Sirianni, that Lurie would change his philosophy and not only hire a defensive coach, but hire a retread like a Mike Vrabel or even a Bill Belichick?
I don't think the Eagles have hired a retread. I can't remember the last time they hired a retread. I'm just going back in their franchise history. Aaron Campbell wasn't a retread. Dick Vermeil wasn't a retread. Buddy Ryan wasn't a retread. You might have to go back to the '60s, and I don't even think they hired one then. I don't really think the Eagles have ever hired a retread head coach ever. So the guy I think, just based on the Eagles' history, who they should look at is Bobby Slowick if they go that route. Kyle Shanahan, Nick Sirianni does not like Kyle Shanahan and his minions, but look what Bobby Slowick did with Brock Purdy, with C.J. Stroud, and look how he's calling plays this year for DeMeco Ryans. It may only be 1 year, but that would be the guy I'm targeting number one if they go based on their history. Mike McDonald, I would like too. They just don't go after defensive head coaches. Maybe Nick Sirianni thinks there is more talent in that building than they realize, Nick Sirianni, Jeffrey Lurie, and Howie Roseman. So they go, maybe we do try to bring in the Jim Harbaugh here, because even though Jim Harbaugh's a West Coast guy and he could coach Justin Herbert, we're a more stable franchise, and we have a top 5 quarterback just like the Chargers do. But we have talent, and we're going to give you full control over the fix-it. Maybe they do that, but the guy I'm looking at first and foremost right now is Bobby Slowick, if they choose to fire Nick Sirianni, which is not a given yet.
Slowick makes a lot of sense. Let me give you one other name, and I'm just suggesting this, not going to bat for it. How about the guy who got Baker Mayfield 335 yards last night?
He's going to be a head coach someday. I don't know if it's going to be this cycle, but I like your thinking, sir.
Yeah, I think Canales could be a guy who gets some consideration, and he fits the mold of what the Eagles like. Offense, young, different, has only been a coordinator for 1 year. There are some things there that fit the profile of the Eagles.
He's got personality too. He's got a pretty active social media account. He's got a couple.
Really?
Yeah. Like he'll tweet stuff like, Bucks win or stuff like that. He'll just tweet like certain things. Or I think one time he tweeted this year, "How about that Baker Mayfield?" I'm like, "Ooh, okay, Dave, I like it."
All right, we'll see how that plays out. All right, so we found out this morning that Jason Kelce told his teammates in the locker room after last night's game that this is it. He could do a 180 and turn around, and they could try and talk him out of it. But as of right now, Jason Kelce has decided to call it a career, and it's an all-time great Eagle career. The other two veterans last night who combined on a sack, that was maybe the highlight of the entire game from an Eagle perspective, the BG Fletcher combo sack. Both are question marks as to whether they're going to be back with this team. BG did say after the game last night he'd like to come back for one more season. You know that Fletcher would love to finish his career in Philadelphia. And to try and define Fletcher Cox in his contract negotiations with the Eagles over the years, I think the Eagles have taken real good care of Fletcher Cox. I think that he's been paid. And Fletcher was probably the most consistent, not the highest end, but the most consistent defensive tackle on his team, or not defensive tackle, defensive lineman, including the edge guys. He was probably more consistent than everybody else. So I want to give Fletcher credit for the season he had, but they're going to be in a cap spot where they're not going to be able to pay him maybe even what he's earned with the kind of season he's had. If BG's back, I think BG will come back for a cap-friendly deal for the Eagles. I'm not sure Fletcher will, because Fletcher has always seemed to get what Fletcher deserves or Fletcher wants from the Eagles. Do you think Fletcher Cox is going to be back as an Eagle next year, Jeff Kerr?
And Fletcher Cox definitely can earn $10 to $12 million in market value this year. I mean, that's how impactful the player is. I wouldn't be surprised if Fletcher Cox called it quits. He just flat out retired. I don't know if
you think he's going to retire.
I know he considered it last year. I didn't think he'd go through with it, but I would have been really curious to see what would happen if the Eagles would have won the Super Bowl last year, because I think Fletch would have. I know he at least thought about it. But you got 10 million reasons to play football, and you're still playing football well. I don't know if Fletcher's going to be back. I think he should be back. I think he's good for that locker room. I think he's good for those young defensive players, which, by the way, a lot of them like him. They love him and they love BG. So I would like to see Fletcher Cox back, but I agree with you, Jody. I just don't know if Fletch would want to come back, if the money's going to be right, if Fletch is ready to call it quits. I know BG wants back. He even told Rob Ellis and Derek Gunn like 2 years ago he wanted to play 15 years and he wanted all 15 to be in Philly. So I think BG will do whatever it takes to come back here for one final year, his farewell tour, as he calls it. Fletch, not sure. I know Lane Johnson will be back. Again, the Jason Kelce stuff, you heard rumblings about him potentially retiring, but nothing definite. It's like, he's still 50-50. But it does look like that's going to be final. But, yeah, to answer your question, I think Fletcher Cox is the biggest wild card in the whole equation.
Yep.
Yeah, crazy. Really an end of an era with the three guys who have played the most games in franchise history may all not be here next season. But you look at that edge, and we're talking about bringing Brandon Graham back potentially. He didn't play as many snaps, nowhere near as many snaps this year that he did last year. And then obviously they move on from Derek Barnett, and we can debate whether that was a good move. I think it was. Barnett didn't do anything here. But they lack depth on the edge. So even if you bring back a guy like BG, who's going to give you maybe 25, 30% of the snaps on the season, are we thinking Nolan Smith is going to step up next year? Did we see enough from Nolan Smith down the stretch with this Eagles defense that he's going to be able to step up and help out on that edge? Because Sweat hit a wall. Hassan Reddick's still a good player, but there's another player we got to talk about now that I mentioned Hassan Reddick. He's in the final year of his deal. There was some chatter he wanted a new contract at the start of this season.
And that's where all the problems started, by the way, Bill. That's where a lot of their issues started. So, yeah, it's a good question. Is Nolan Smith the guy? Do they go add some free agent help there? Do they draft another edge rusher? I don't think Nolan Smith got the opportunity, personally. Whether he deserved it or not is another story. But I don't think they trusted Nolan Smith enough to play him like they did Kelly Ringo and Eli Ricks later in the season. But then again, I never judge defensive ends and edge rushers after year one. Brandon Graham didn't really do much in year one either. A lot of guys don't. Even the great ones like Aiden Hutchinson had a great year one, and it's like, okay, that felt empty for the number 2 overall pick. Now look what he did in year 2. So again, I think you gotta give Nolan Smith at least 2 more years here. I think you gotta give him an off season, get used to the rigors of the NFL. But you're right, the depth just wasn't there. That's why it was a head scratcher to me when they got rid of Barnett, even though there were problems there between Barnett, between the front office, between playing time. It's, well, okay, are you going to play Nolan Smith more? Well, you didn't really. So you played 3 guys, and it kind of bit you in the ass. So, yeah, they're going to have more depth there.
I don't think the mistake was getting rid of Barnett. I think the mistake was bringing him back in the offseason.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Because you went into this season knowing that he hasn't given you anything in years. And then, you had to cut him and you had no backup plan for any depth along that line. But we talked about it before you came on. This defense, you talk about lacking personnel, which I don't think they lack on offense. Defense, they severely lacked personnel. And that's
I think us 3 could have went back there. I know us 3 could have went back there and given up the most passing yards and passing touchdowns in the NFL. So, I mean, Bro's doing it. It's a shame too, because there's a lot of guys in that defense I like. There's a lot of guys on that defense that have potential, but man, it just felt like a leaky pipe all year. They were just trying to fix it with flex it or whatever it was, and it wasn't working. That's how that defense felt. Like, they signed Zach Cunningham, they signed Miles Jack. Jack retires, goes back to the Steelers later. It just sucks up the joint. Cunningham was fine, but as you guys saw last night, he's not Zach Cunningham anymore. It's same with Shaq Leonard, and I've talked to Shaq Leonard enough. Like, he's just not the same guy. He just isn't, and he's got a lot to think about this all season too. I think he's ready to wrap up his NFL career just based on all his injuries and other things. But yeah, it's not good. They need to overhaul linebacker, cornerback, safety. I guess even with Reed Blankenship, because Sidney Brown's hurt, so I'll expect him back at least in early 2024. So that'll be something. Edge rusher, they need more depth. I really the only position you feel confident in, and again, is they bring Fletcher Cox back, is defensive tackle.
Let me ask you about one individual. I know this is narrow focusing, but I do want to do it because it makes a point on the Eagles, their roster, the coaching, what they get out of it. Going into last night's game, if they had listened to Bill Calarulo here on Birds 365 yesterday, they would have run the ball, and then run the ball some more. That didn't happen. But it was a viable way to look at it coming into the game. They didn't do it. So if you're not going to do that, knowing that you got no A.J. Brown, was it mid-second quarter when Julio took the shot and he was done for the game?
Yeah, after he caught the 14-yard pass.
Right. But it was first half. So you got an entire second half to play. So you're missing your number one receiver. You're missing, realistically, your third best wide receiver. So you got Devontae Quez and Britton Covey as your wide receivers. We thought they'd play a lot of two tight ends. They did.
By the way, Joey, they don't play Britton Covey enough as they should. I mean, honestly, a lot of
you don't. You have no idea. You have no idea what Britton Covey can do as a wide receiver.
But those players on offense
I don't.
do.
The
those
Eagles
players
don't.
On
Nobody
offense
knows
do.
whether he can do it.
The quarterback
thinks
he can do it.
Covey.
The quarterback does think he can do it. I'm just saying.
Who does the quarterback not think he can do it? Who has Jalen Hurts ever said, yeah, I'm not sure about throwing the ball to him? So I'm not giving that any credence.
I'm just telling you, behind closed doors, they think he can do it.
All right, behind closed doors. Here's a guy who I at least saw make some catches during the year, and I think he's a good receiver, and he played one garbage time snap yesterday. Grant Calcaterra, who was a draft pick. Granted, day 3 draft pick, but a draft pick, and a draft pick for a tight end who was supposed to be able to catch the ball. Is he that bad at blocking that they couldn't get him out there for more than one snap in a game where you're already missing A.J. Brown? In game, you lose Julio Jones, and Grant Calcaterra can only get one snap. Is that Calcaterra? Is that Howie Roseman? I know, third day 3 pick, but a draft pick, not an off-the-street free agent type, and or the coaching staff. How do you have a game when you're so desperate for guys who can catch the football that Grant Calcaterra can't get one snap in prime time?
Or maybe give Jack Stoll a couple routes. Again, I'm not sure. Again, this is part of my problem with how the Eagles run things. You want to run 11 personnel. If you want to do 13, 21, fine. But did you just abandon 12 personnel over the last couple of years? I know the way the league's trending. I understand that. But I know Jack Stoll can catch a football. I know Jack Stoll has value on this football team. You just don't use him. Same with Grant Calcaterra. It's like, you're right, Joe. Is he that bad? Is he? I don't know. And that's another thing you got to fix. They just don't have the weapons outside of the talented guys, Brown, Smith, Goddard. People think they do. And that's my issue. Omalai Zaccheaus, love the guy. Great guy to talk to. They did not play him much this year. They didn't. Wes Watkins, every time Wes Watkins seemed to get the ball or get targeted, nothing good happened. They don't trust Cut. Well, at least during the game, they don't. I know the quarterback likes him. I know a lot of offensive guys like him. He would have been probably an ideal person to go across the middle. But again, they don't go across the middle. So again, I just don't see the talent or the coaching to get this thing to where they need to go with their high-end players. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you that they need to upgrade the wide receiver 3. They need to upgrade their second tight end. But it wouldn't have mattered, in my opinion, who the wide receivers were last night, who the tight ends were last night. They did not game plan for a blitz that we all knew was coming. According to Next Gen Stats, the Buccaneers generated 10 unblocked pressures last night, tied for the most in the game of any defense this season. 10 unblocked pressures on Jalen Hurts. Now, we know Jalen Hurts has struggled against the blitz. He doesn't trust his pocket. He exits the pocket right away as soon as he gets pressure, but they're not helping him out. And we talked about this before you came on the show. Every single player on that offensive side of the football, every one of them took a step backwards this season. So, yeah, they need to upgrade the wide receiver 3. They need to upgrade their second tight end. But there's no reason why you're coming out against a Tampa Bay Bucks defense and putting up 9 points. There's no reason why you're coming out.
Oh, well, I can see that scoring 9 points because that's just, look, it's Todd Bowles is a really good defensive coach. I knew he was going to blitz. They knew he was going to blitz. They don't have an answer. That's what I'm just trying to say. They didn't have an answer. They didn't have an answer all season. They weren't going to have an answer.
But I do think they have enough talent on offense. They didn't play up to their talent. I want to see them upgrade the positions we talked about. But even without A.J. Brown last night, they had talent to move the football. It's what they chose to do with it. And the one frustrating thing to me, too, is we talk about DeAndre Swift not getting the ball enough in the running game. How excited were all of us on that draft day trade that they're going to have a running back that can finally catch the ball out of the backfield. They're going to take advantage of DeAndre Swift out of the backfield in the passing game. He caught the least amount of passes of his entire career this season with the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's why I just didn't understand why they brought DeAndre Swift in when they weren't going. They showed over the 2 years with Miles Sanders. And Miles Sanders was good. He didn't get the targets in college. He was good pass catching back in college. He ran good routes. I don't know what happened there. The Eagles never targeted him. Kenny Gainwell was the same way in college. They just don't target their running backs in the passing game. That's all I'm like.
Yeah,
why didn't DeAndre Swift in then? I thought they changed too, Bill, but history told me they weren't.
Yeah, you're disrespecting DeAndre Swift. He had a damn good year for the Eagles for the price that they got him. I
don't think he's coming back.
Whether he's coming back or not, he had a good year for the Eagles. They couldn't afford to keep Miles Sanders. They had to replace him cheaply, and DeAndre Swift did as much as he could have been possibly expected to do. And the thing about him not catching the passes, and this could be a major knock on Jalen Hurts, I just don't think he's good at throwing those type of passes. I don't think they have confidence to call those type of plays. I think he stinks at throwing the ball out of the backfield, dump offs, call it what you want, screen pass. I think he's bad at it, and they know it, and that's why they don't call those plays. And
his
that's why
third and sixth ball to Kenny Gainwell was so predictable too. But Gainwell just kind of stood all the way at the end and Hurts. I don't know if he lobbed it. I don't know what. I mean, it wasn't going to be a first down anyway.
And that's oh man, was that a telltale play? Their D-back comes up and just drops Gainwell exactly right where he was. No questions asked.
Meanwhile, didn't have a chance anyway.
Backs are whipping at guys all night long as they're running by.
Honestly, you could have threw that ball to DeAndre Swift, and he probably would have only gotten one more yard. That's just how bad that was.
He was wide open, and that's why Jalen threw him the ball, but they did absolutely nothing with it. All right, Jeff Kerr, last thing, we need a prediction for you when we have you back on again next week. Are we going to be talking about the fact that the Eagles have a coaching opening, or that they have already hired a new coach, or that Nick Sirianni is still the head coach of the Eagles?
I know we'll definitely be talking about the offensive and defensive coordinator. I'm
talking about the head coach. We'll get
I know.
the coordinators. I'm asking you.
You know what, Jody? If you ask me that, it's a good question. I think Nick Sirianni needs. I'll be honest with you, I don't have an answer for you.
You're not willing to commit. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have a feeling you will be talking about a lot of coaching stuff on Birds 365.
For
the next
sure.
couple of weeks.
But we'll see if it's the head coach. Jeff Kerr, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for hopping on with us today. We'll talk again soon, brother.
Yep. Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
See you, man.
CBSSports.com, one of their lead NFL writers, Jeff Kerr, here with us on Birds 365. All right, Colarulo and McDonald coming back in less than 20 minutes. Mike Tanier for the Messenger, formerly FootballOutsiders.com, is going to jump in. And I thought we should get a guy who writes about not only the Eagles, but a national perspective as well, just so we can compare what happened to the Eagles to everybody else, regular season into the postseason and like. And by the way, Bill Colarulo, a quickie quiz for you before we go to break.
What you got?
Playoff games this past weekend, wild card round. Who is the only home team that lost?
The Dallas Cowboys.
Dallas Cowboys. Every home team won this weekend, extended weekend, 6 games worth, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday, 2 Monday. The only home team that lost, the Dallas Cowboys. I figured I'd stick that in there just to make Eagle fans feel a little bit better today when there isn't really all that much to feel good about.
Bit of joy, though. It does. It makes us feel just a little bit better.
Yeah, take a little bit of the edge off. Hey, Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you need to do. Call Jim or Fran and Del Valley Insurance right now.
My name is Fran Salerno. I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.